From the Rose City in beautiful downtown Portland, Oregon, home of bikes, books, bridges, beards, food carts, startups, and indie coffee. Grab your dog, snatch your hammer and beer, leave your umbrella at home. Welcome to the Tiny House Podcast.
It's the Tiny House Podcast. Ow, I just crushed my hand on my ring.
Wow.
It's the Tiny House Podcast. I'm Perry.
It's the Tiny House Podcast. I'm a ringless MJ.
It's the Tiny House Podcast. I've got many rings if you cut me in half because I'm an old tree.
Tree.
Good one.
You old tree. You.
We were chopping wood with my land host this past week, and they were fascinated with they would, we'd get the round, and they would stop and count the round.
Oh, nice.
Look, this was a great growing year, and I'm standing in the rain, can we just get shit done today? Because it's raining, and I got other stuff I can do. I'm happy to help, but not at this
Not
pace.
counting the rings.
Not counting the rings.
Any fires or anything in them rings? This was a bad year because you could see
No, not in this particular forest. And these were all trees that were actually cut down on our property, where we live.
Yep.
And they're old, and so you can't hand split anymore. So what it was is we rented one of those hydraulic splitters.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Very cool, very fun. Mm-hmm. So his wife, she did the lever, and then he did the loading, and then I did the unloading, and we did 2 cords probably in about 4 or 5 hours.
Wow. Including the cutting down or just the splitting?
Just the splitting.
still backbreaking.
Yeah, it was a lot of work.
Is this something you do as part of the agreement you have with them, or are you just being friendly?
It is something I do because I think it's the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. So, as part of our quote-unquote agreement, I will help with property maintenance.
I see.
So I'm not sure if cutting their winter wood is really property maintenance, but it encourages him to cut down trees out of my section.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
If you cut them and you cut them in chunks, then I will help you load the branches onto the burning pile. Mm. I will help you split the rounds into, wood, and then it gets those dead trees out of my way. So it's one less thing I got to worry about.
And you're making room for
more tiny houses.
Yay! What's the latest on that?
So I have 2 more right now. So number 5, my 5th tiny house build is the tiny hideout. My tiny hideout. It arrived at my property last week, and the outside's completely done. Windows, doors, siding, roofing, totally dry. Now I need to, of course, finish the inside. And then I did a super crazy thing and bought someone else's project only because it's on a 10,000-pound trailer. So I know that I have plenty of bandwidth and ability to remodel. It'll be a remodel. So 10,000-pound trailer, 22-foot long shell, basically. So it's a 20-foot shell with a 2-foot porch. Wow. And I paid $1,000 for it. So
1,000?
Yeah.
Jill's looking for a deal.
Yes, apparently.
Yes. So I paid $1,000 for a shell on a 10,000-pound trailer. So that one will happen relatively quickly as well because the shell's already done, and I got plenty of weight to work with. So
why did they sell it for so little?
I think part of it actually is because they liked me. So, however, with that being said, the listing price on Craigslist was $1,750. So even that was a good deal. It is an old cook shack owned by.
Do you know what that is?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what it is we have a little small town in Oregon called Cottage Grove. They have a little philanthropic organization called the Prospectors Club. So once a year, the Prospectors Club serves breakfast at the top of the mountain somewhere, and they charge $25 a person, and everybody traipses up the mountain, and they serve breakfast out of this, what used to be a cook shack. So they put 10,000 pounds worth of axle on it because they had 4 huge cast iron pancake grills.
Oh, wow.
On the inside of this, structure. So they had to beef up the axles. So they decided to upgrade to a different one. and they serve 1,500 people pancakes out of this cook shack in 6 hours last year. So,
Wow.
anyways, so they built a new one. They were getting rid of the old one. I met them. I told them what I had in mind and offered them $1,000 cash, and they said, "Sold."
Nice.
Here's the title.
Nice.
Perfect.
Well, I was trying to find a picture of a cook shack on the internet, and I don't see one.
Yeah, so
It's like the wagon wheel base thing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
I
kind of.
presume,
You know,
yeah.
we'll take the because the windows are currently plywood. The whole flip up
Oh, yeah.
kind of plywood thing. So we'll take those off obviously and replace them with real windows and wrap it and put siding on. But again, all of that is only possible because of the 10,000-pound trailer. I mean, that's a rare thing to find. A trailer or renovation that has that much possibility.
It's like they were gypsies or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Keep it going. Keep it going.
The door comes open.
Speaking of gypsies, we have a returning guest to the show today, Jewel Pearson, who's, I think her tiny house is called Gypsy Soul. Is that right?
Miss Gypsy Soul.
Miss Gypsy,
Miss Gypsy
Soul.
Soul.
Yes. And it's how long has it been, Michelle, since we've had Jewel on the show?
2 years.
2 years. So
Right, because the last time so this is the third time we've had her on the
this
show.
is the third time.
Correct.
Right.
Yep.
We got her
Colorado.
live
Yep.
in Colorado.
Yep.
And then before that or after that?
Before.
Before that, we had her on by herself,
Right.
and then we had her on, in Colorado, and that was 2 years ago. Isn't that crazy?
That's crazy.
hard to believe.
It is hard to believe. So, Jewel,
Time is flying.
time is flying. So, what's going on? What has been going on with you since the last time we talked at the Jamboree?
Oh, a whole lot.
I know.
Like,
Where do you start?
where do we want to start? What do we want to jump into first?
I'd like to ask a question about so it's been it's been 2 years or so since we talked about the diversity of the tiny house movement. Have you seen any changes or shifts in that?
I've seen lots of changes and shifts, and it's not been positive.
I was gonna clarify and say any positive
Yeah.
shifts, but okay, let's just go there.
Let's just go there. We might as well start off right off the top on the good stuff. Let's see, in those 2 years, so the last conversation we were talking about the need for diversity and representation and all that good stuff, and everybody was going to do things differently and consideration and blah, blah, blah. And I would say for the most part, it has been blah, blah, blah.
Right.
I feel like in those last 2 years, the lineups have still been the same of very few people of color. I continued to call it out, and in that 2 year span of me calling it out, I would probably say I've gotten maybe blacklisted from the community. I got a very nice, nasty, anonymous, threatening email. Lee Pera, who, kind of was calling it out as well and responded to actually one of the not this past event, I think it was a year before, I actually called it out again and made a Facebook post about it when the event had changed to the new location and the new management.
Jamboree for Reed Expos in Arlington. Yeah.
I see.
Right.
Yep.
I called it out, made a Facebook post about it, how, it was more of the same. And I made it a public post, and apparently it ruffled a few feathers, and people who aren't even my friends were paying attention and screenshotting my post and making notes of who was commenting on it and what was being said. And Lee Pera, who commented and said, we've talked about this and things needed to be changed. And she actually had emailed several of the quote finger leaders to ask them to kind of step back and because in the way it's done for other events is that, speakers say, I don't want to participate if you don't have people of color, and everybody kind of sticks together to say, to provide space for people of color and diversity in the network. And so Lee, I think, had suggested that to several people, and it kind of, emails that were done on the side, and then she commented on my post. and it was apparently taken note of, and she was then uninvited from the event. And so I feel like it is to say I've been disappointed is probably an understatement. I feel like for a community that wants to affect change and wants everyone to accept something, a living style that is different. I feel like in so many ways they still want to be status quo. You know, we want to do this new innovative thing, but we still want to do it kind of the ways of the world, the way things are done. We don't want to stick our neck out for, you know, the things that are right as far as diversity and representation. You know, I feel like so many times I hear find your tribe, which again, quote fingers for tribe, because if anybody knows anything about that, they'll also know that the Native Americans have said, could you quit saying that? But so I feel like it's been more of the same. I had the issue at another event as a speaker, headed to an event in Florida, ran into a actual, you know, what I had been saying, the locations are a challenge and up for danger. And had the incident where I had a run-in with a racist right before going on to speak in Florida, and I didn't feel comfortable, and had to have, you know, a knockdown drag out with the event organizer who didn't understand that my safety was my priority versus coming, you know, and I feel like I did everything as I could as a professional to still go on site to try to locate him and others to say, hey, I'm not feeling comfortable in this area, and wasn't able to do it. And so then I had to make my safety the priority. And that wasn't understood. And if you've not lived in the skin of a person of color and understand how, you know, how it feels to be unsafe in areas, then I can't explain it to you to make you understand. And therein lies either compassion or a lack of compassion. And so, I think I've heard everything from if Jewel would be more like Martin Luther King versus Malcolm X as far as my tone and the words that I use, which to me is a bunch of BS because, you know, it's 2018 and everybody wants to think that they would have followed Martin Luther King and what he was doing. But history will show you that's not the case. But, you know, as you look back on it, it's easy to say, you know, he was peaceful and, you know, he was leading in this way and we would have followed all of that versus, trying to police the words that I use versus listening and understanding the message. And so I guess for the most part, I would say I'm done with the community. I feel like it has been more of profit. We want to keep going this way because it's making us money. These are the names and the faces that are known versus what I would say is doing the right thing. And I've kind of taken myself in a direction of participating in areas where I'm not fighting to be included. I don't want to fight to be included. That's not welcoming. That's not what I want to do. I don't want to be in spaces where I'm not welcome. I prefer to be in spaces where the conversations happen because people want to participate in those conversations. And so that has been the direction over the past couple of years that I've gone in with Dominique and with Lee, and we've been just doing some things in some different spaces. You know, who wants to? I was speaking to someone else, and they said, you know, it kind of sounds like you're pushing a boulder uphill, and absolutely. And I'm done with that one.
Yeah.
So, if I understand correctly, then you're not. Are you? Let me see. How would you like to comment on the people of color they are, you know, encouraging or allowing on stage? Do you consider that not far enough or not enough? Is it just that the conversation has stopped and, you know, yes, they have speakers of color, but the conversation has stopped. So it feels to me like we have made a little progress, but probably not as much as you would expect or would think. So can you comment on that?
I would agree with that as far as, you know, a little progress, and it's 2018. Okay, so I'll give a little progress. Yes, there have been people of color, but and I also want to go back and say this was one of the nasty anonymous email that I got, said that I was only happy if I was being invited to speak. And I think I've said from the beginning, this wasn't about me. This was about representation there. And on one of our emails, messages, we listed a whole bunch of people that should be included to speak. So it was never about me personally.
Right.
But as far as moving the conversation forward, like for the problem that I had going to the event in Florida, I wasn't the only person of color who had a problem at that event with racism.
I recall Bonnie had a challenge. Was that correct?
No. That was something totally different, and I don't want to associate it with that. No, it was actually an attendee that had a problem with someone that grabbed his clothes on site.
Grabbed his clothes and did what? Like the clothes he was wearing?
Yeah, a guy reached out to me. He was apparently wearing a dashiki on site at the event, and he said an older white guy came up to him and grabbed his shirt and kind of twisted it and asked him what he was wearing and why. And he kind of diffused it instead of addressing it aggressively.
Right.
But the man, MJ, I think the conversation, so I've had a conversation with a person of color that I know was doing some speaking at one of the events, and what she was addressing was more related to veterans, and
Correct.
we had a side conversation, and she said to me that she had not experienced any of the racism that I had experienced so far. And I said to her, no, I mean no disrespect, but in this country, veterans trump everything. And so people are going to love your message because they don't. It's kind of like, if Perry probably can relate to this. Racists like Michael Jordan because he represents basketball. They don't see him as the person. They're looking at what he represents, and they don't see him as a black person. And I'm not taking anything away from her and what she's doing, but her message is about veterans, and so no, people don't find that offensive. They can get behind veterans in this country.
Right.
When you're talking about communities and inclusion and things that need to be done to address racism and how to be more inclusive, that's not a feel-good message, and people aren't comfortable with it, and therein comes the negativity. So that's two totally different things.
It's literally not feel good. Like, you can't get any more literal than how not feeling good people get when you bring that up.
Exactly. And so so for that person not to have experienced the racism, that's exactly why, because everybody can get behind what you're doing and feel good about it.
Yeah. So, Michelle, we've talked in the last couple of episodes about the shakeout of builders in the tiny house movement.
Yes.
Would you say, we're going to get back, this conversation that I'm starting, Jewel, is going to come back to you.
Okay.
Would you say that the community itself has kind of slowed down or what words do I want to use? Kind of like come off its peak.
Leveled.
That's a good word. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And if so, would you say that a lot of the spotlight that would cause one to want to continue this effort has kind of waned also?
Yeah, I would say overall that's true. I would consider the tiny house movement at this point more factioned than it even was before. There are regional factions. There's a distinct difference between the East Coast builders and what they think they want and need and the West Coast builders. There's a distinct difference between the DIY movement and the professional builders in general. There's a huge difference between those people that are doing it for charitable organizations or charitable reasons versus business, right? There seems to be those two factions are warring, for lack of a better term. There's also factions there's people that understand or fight or, the differences between certified RVIA, certified tiny houses and non-RVIA, even within the builders. So there's a lot of factions going on right now, and that has overall led to the, I guess I don't think it's jumped the shark.
Maybe disillusionment among community members?
It definitely has led to some slowing of the progress, slowing of the conversations. And then, of course, we talked about a couple of episodes ago, if you look at the list of people that we've actually interviewed, probably about 50% of the builders or about 50% of the occupants no longer occupy or are building tiny houses. That may be because of these factions, it may be because of other issues, but overall, the movement itself I see very, very, very divided and very cooling, I think, as a result.
So, Jewel, I keep wanting to call you Ruby Jewel, which is an ice cream company here in Portland. I don't know why that is, but so Jewel, given what we just talked about here, what do you is it really worth fighting this fight?
Oh, and you heard me say I'm no longer interested in fighting. I think I gave up that fight a year and a half or so ago. It doesn't feel good to push to be in spaces that you aren't necessarily welcomed. And there are so many other things, especially with the climate in the world today. There's so many other things that I need to focus on.
Exactly.
That I have no desire to fight to be in spaces that I'm not welcome. And so that is why Lee and Dominique and I had started doing some things, our own events, art, culture, creativity, and tiny houses. We did some in New Orleans and in DC, and we're going to kick off the first of the year with that and some workshops, trying to be in spaces where the energy is welcoming and the conversation is open and genuine and is heartfelt and feels good. And that's absolutely where I want to be.
And maybe that's part of the cooling or the perceived cooling.
And
maybe everyone maybe that's, I mean, I sort of hold a similar perspective. Great, y'all do what you're going to do. That's wonderful, but I'm going to be over here. I'm going to be controlling what I can control. I'm going to be hostessing and creating a positive environment. I'm going to advocate for tiny houses, but in my own way, in my own corner, with my people that I know that I can love and trust. So maybe the perceived cooling of the movement is more so just because everybody's been tired of fighting to be a part of it, and then they figure out, wait a minute, y'all have an identity crisis. I don't even know what I'm trying to be a part of. So y'all figure out your shit, and in the meantime, I'm going to be over here, and I'm still going to do what I need to do for me and my tiny house and my environment and my community.
And I think everybody,
I agree with that.
Yeah, and everybody on all sides of the issues are doing the same thing.
Right.
Everybody's doing that, it seems like.
I agree with that. My thing, it still frustrates me to see a flyer roll out and it's still more of the same. But that is for me the overall world, and so that's frustrating to me. I still feel like if people aren't addressing some of the safety concerns as safety becomes more and more an issue in this day and age for people of color, there's still the potential of something happening. And then, at that point, I'll just be over here saying, I kind of warned you guys about that a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and that I do want to say that I had an issue with an event and very much a safety related issue with an event and with a person. And when I notified the event organizer, I very much got the brush off as well.
Really?
And then later on, the organizer circled back and went, by the way. So anyways, I can say that even beyond people of color, I think that the event organizers, if any of you are listening, I feel that they need to do a little bit better job of either screening or understanding the credentials of who they are putting on stage and what they have to offer, and making sure that they're not promoting people that are not... don't belong there.
Some names popped in my
head. You and me both. We can have a whole different show on that topic alone.
Exactly. I agree 100%. agree 100%. And something's going to happen, and somebody's going to get hurt, and they're going to say, "Oh, that's what they were talking about."
Yeah.
Right.
And so I feel like that's on them. But I totally have no desire to, after I said it, I jumped into the movement and had high hopes that, here were these people that wanted to do some things differently, and it was all feel good, and then it became more of the same. This is BS, and you all really don't want to do anything that that's not suiting yourselves and isn't putting money in your pocket. So let me go back over here and mind my business.
Yeah, I think it's interesting with this movement and other new type things like this, where I think you're right, Jewel. People do want to do things that feel good, and often that when someone raises things that doesn't make them feel good, then they recoil against that because they're trying to do something that feels good, and they don't want to have to deal with the part that doesn't feel good.
It's the internet, 1995, 96.
Yeah, exactly.
Like kumbaya
Yeah.
at first. Everyone's working together.
Yeah.
Domains are free.
Right.
Woohoo! It's
Yeah.
a big party.
Right.
And all of a
Yeah.
sudden it's like, hey, that fucker's making money.
Yeah.
Hey, what's going on?
Yeah.
Hey, I'm not with my people. I need more of
Yeah.
that. All these things that start to
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah.
Which,
Right.
like you said, it's like it ebbs and flows in waves, and that's kind of what it feels like it's doing right now, especially in the political climate the last 2 years.
I was going to bring that up. Yeah, as the political climate has certainly not helped the situation, and in some ways it has, because it has contributed to what you, Jewel, and what Michelle are saying, that people have turned toward who they are most comfortable with.
Absolutely.
Both for positive and for
out
negative.
Front. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Out front. And I can know who I'm dealing with.
Yeah.
I'm right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know who I'm dealing with.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of it is a farce, and it was disappointing to recognize it once the layers came off. But
but is that I kind of want to challenge you a little bit on that, Jewel, because let me ask, I'll just put it this way. What did you expect was going to happen? you know?
Why are you shooting my bubble down?
No kumbaya forever.
Yeah, it was in this movement. We were doing some things differently, and it was going to be different. And then it was like, damn it, it's more the same. And I just had high hopes. So forgive me for just a lapse in thinking something was different and new and all of that.
Yeah,
I'm back now.
That mood, that Jamboree 1 was such a tipping point, and it set the expectation so high for everyone.
Everybody, yeah.
I mean, maybe for our new podcast listeners, Jamboree 1, we were expecting 5,000 people, and 45,000 people showed up.
Right.
I mean, it was astonishing, and everybody that was there, Jewel included. I mean, everybody was there. A lot of people, again, that were at Jam 1 are still around, but anyways, it set the expectations so high. I think we, in many ways, set ourselves up to be disappointed.
And that
Absolutely.
and I think that happens with almost every one of those
Industry?
things. No, every one of those kind of
First-time events.
moments. Well, moments like with
Yeah.
Obama and
Yep.
the '60s hippie thing
Yep.
and the all.
There's nothing, wait. You dropped the O word. There's nothing wrong with Obama.
I'm not saying there's anything wrong with
there was
Obama.
a special time.
There was a
and
special
place.
time, and the expectations were raised
Oh,
really
really?
high
Oh, okay.
as a result of
Okay.
Obama.
But Obama, too.
Thank you, MJ.
Yeah.
Get that clear.
Yeah. Well, I'm not criticizing Obama. What I'm saying is that the expectations, in fact, you could say the expectations leveled on Obama pretty much set Obama up
Yep.
to end up
Right.
where he
Right.
ended up in the second round.
Right.
Yep.
And so,
I agree.
and as a result of that, we ended up getting. Now, some people may not acknowledge what I'm about to say,
No.
but
Probably me.
He's doing it.
but I think
Oh no!
I
He's
think
driving there.
Not where we are right now.
I think a
That's what
big
you're getting ready to
reason
say.
why Trump is in the White House is because
Absolutely.
Obama was in the White
Yep.
House.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That is the whole
And
answer.
Putin.
Yeah. And Putin. Yeah. and so in the same, so to bring this back to the tiny house community, I think the same thing happened after that like you said, astonishing turnout at the Jamboree. Everyone's hopes got really high, and for better or for worse, Jewel, you got swept up in that, and your filter in the high was, oh my gosh, here's an opportunity to do something for society that has never been really done before.
Absolutely.
And then the rest of the people were like, nuh-uh.
No. not today, sister. Not today.
On the other hand, Reed Expo. I mean, Reed Expo bought the Jamboree after anyways, I forget. But Reed Expo, they got caught up in it too. I mean, they came along and they're like, hey, 70,000 people attended this little podunk event. If we put our money and muscle and everything behind it, we're going to throw a Jamboree in Texas. Everything's big in Texas. And then they stuck this liberal event in the middle of, Republican Central. And then they're like, how come nobody showed up? And we lost.
Oh, really?
Oh, they lost. 2 years in a row. Jamboree lost so much, in trying to, again, recreate the magic.
I'm so not sad. Reed was instrumental in the post that I made in monitoring my post. Reed was instrumental in uninviting Lee and being very nasty about it. And so I have no sympathy there.
So the Jamboree is no longer.
Tink.
Yeah, the Jamboree is no longer offered as an independent event now.
Interesting.
So this past year was the last year of the quote unquote tiny house Jamboree standalone Reed Expo thing. They're recreating it, reinventing it. They're rolling it up into another expo, and so
As a part of what though? What are they doing? Like
the
schoolies,
campers, and RVs.
No. They're rolling it up into the Tool Expo or something. There's a
Tools?
Tools as in building, as in builders.
Oh.
Right. So there's another expo that has to do with building materials and tools, and they're going to roll up they're going to join the Tiny House Jamboree with this other expo and combine them.
Interesting.
But the Jamboree as a standalone event is done.
Well, I guess that makes sense because look at the sponsorship situation. You need Black & Decker. You need these people that are going to supply the stuff to build the tiny houses because Lord knows there's no other sponsors there.
Yep.
Yeah.
But the People's Tiny House Festival, however, is trying to keep true to the original format. They are going to be back in Colorado, at the original location. So
good.
So hopefully.
So I'm gonna go off the mic for a second and ask Michelle a question because I really want to talk about this topic, but I don't think we can. So Michelle, would you come over here for a second?
Sure.
They're whispering. No, it's a big lock lip. Oh, they're kissing.
Oh,
no, they're not.
No.
You still can't? Okay.
Nope.
Okay.
Nope.
Wow, that's interesting.
I'll tell you why off. I'll tell you why off camera.
Well,
okay.
Can
So let's put
somebody text me later?
I don't know what's going on either, Joel. That's okay. I'm just sitting here
here's
watching
what
them.
they did.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right.
An airplane noise.
So it's not really any news there.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, damn.
I'll text you. I'll text you right
yeah,
now.
There's nothing like a private insight talk on radio.
on
So
radio.
fascinating. Good Lord.
We do hand gestures in the studio.
We do,
all the
but while
time.
we're talking, at least we don't go into total just nothing but ASL language for crying out loud. It's the all ASL show.
So after you said you're planning events with Dominique and the others, those have not happened yet, or are they in process?
No, we did a couple last year, and we just haven't kicked off anything. Not last year, and Lee and I spoke at some other bigger events this year around. I can't think of the conferences. We were invited to speak at a conference.
Not tiny house conferences.
Not tiny house related, but they wanted to talk about, it was actually about diversity and housing and those types of things. So it was really a really good event that was tiny house related, but it was as a I'm going to have to come up with the name of the conference before we are done here so I can do them some justice. But we've been invited to speak at some other events that have been really good, where the conversations have been open to, housing and diversity and people of color and those types of things. So we haven't kicked off our calendar for 2019, but we're going to be doing that soon. Of course, I don't know when this will air, but early December, I'm headed out to California for a few days, and then I'll catch up with Dominique. And January, I'm going to go up to D.C. and hang out with Lee some. So we're doing good stuff and feel good stuff and with feel good, audiences versus the push.
Would you say this has kind of been a pivot for you in terms of what you're attaching your identity to, broadening into housing more so than just tiny houses?
A pivot? Do I think it's a pivot? No, I kind of think it's more of the same conversation. Racism and it's just been some segues into some different areas. I would say that it's the same conversation.
I see.
It's a great, for all the negativity or for all of the disappointment that we have, I think it's a great platform to stand on.
Which platform?
The platform of been there, done that. This is what I experienced, and this is what I'm going to take from that experience.
Oh, absolutely.
In other words,
life lessons kind of thing.
Well, yeah. I mean, even, if anyways, I was just talking a couple of days ago about someone coming on as an agent, and getting me back on stage, not in the tiny house industry, but outside the tiny house industry, right?
People that have checkbooks, you mean?
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
Well, that's definitely an upside to going, shall we say, mainstream.
Yep.
That was definitely also a very interesting aspect of the tiny house movement. What do you mean a house costs more than $20,000?
Right.
Yeah, so there wasn't a lot of generous, ton of opportunity there for me. But
I feel like the conversations that we're having where you're not feeling like you have to prove your worth, where people value what you know and what you've done and want to have conversations with you. And I feel like that's something totally different.
Correct. Absolutely.
For sure that, part of when I was pushing to say people of color should be included as speakers at some of the events, there were a couple of people who commented on my post that wanted to know what the people of color's credentials were, that the people that were being highlighted had these portfolios of their bills and felt like the people of color needed to validate their worth to be on the stage. And I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? So the conference that Lee and I spoke at was the American Association of Geographers. And a portion of that was that our presentation was land, autonomy, and inclusivity in the tiny house strategy. So it went back to, past times and just kind of pulled it into the day to today and the tiny house movement. And it was an excellent conversation. And again, where, people are interested in this conversation. And these are, geographers and people with backgrounds in this information who want to have these discussions and how do we push this forward. And that definitely feels better than, validating yourself in the middle of a field with people who built a tiny house that aren't interested in what you're talking about.
Amen.
Awesome. Amen. That's a nice way to end the show.
Amen.
Jill, once again, it's been wonderful having you on the show.
Thank you, Ruby.
Yeah, thank you. Good luck.
It's always a pleasure.
Yeah.
I feel like, so I'd like to end this saying that because I'm very cognizant of the fact that a lot of people in the community feel like I'm the angry Black woman. I'm not angry. I'm passionate about what I talk about. I feel like the conversation is one that is worthy and is worthy to be discussed, but I'm good. I'm in a really good place. I'm like you, Michelle. I'm moving into areas where there's value and I feel like the message is important.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for taking time.
Yeah, we wanted to have you back on a special day as a special guest.
Yep.
Thank you.
Sure.
I appreciate you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And Tiny House audience and listeners, we appreciate you too. And so thanks for listening to another one of our episodes. Tune in next week because we're going to have another one.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
And Rick McNerney, thanks for making us sound so good.
Faux show.
He's amazing.
Listeners, tune in 3 weeks for other such announcements and stuff. I don't know. I'm just saying. All right.
Namaste.
Thank you for listening to Tiny House Podcast. To find us online, go to tinyhousepodcast.com, where you will also find our show notes, if we remember to put them there. Our logo was designed by the amazing Carolyn Main. Our website is hosted by the gang at Sitecast. Our theme music is by Oma Studio. Please go to iTunes and give us a 5-star rating, or whatever, you tiny house loving bastard. Tiny House Podcast is proudly made in Portland, Oregon.